everyone, I'm Jocelyn from Custom Teaching Solutions. Today, I'd like to talk to you about some things to consider as you're planning your Thanksgiving lesson. Now, whether Thanksgiving is a few months away or a few days away, there are some key things to think about. The first is this: the traditional first Thanksgiving meal story that most of us were told as children, at this point we know it is inaccurate. So my question for consideration is, why are we still teaching it? Now, in another video, I will talk about some reasons that we can still use that story in the classroom and how to use that story in the classroom. But for the most part, because we know that the story is inaccurate, then I would ask you to consider taking it off the table, pun intended. It is a story that is not based in truth and accuracy, and it doesn't necessarily add to your students' understanding of being grateful and being thankful. So what are some other ways that you can really help your students to understand those concepts without incorporating a story that is not based in truth? The second thing I would love for you to consider is this: by continuing to share this story, how are we minimizing the richness and the vastness of the history of the indigenous people? Because a lot of teachers start their study of the Native Americans with this Thanksgiving holiday, it's very limiting. The Native American people were here long before the Pilgrims arrived, and their story starts way before the Pilgrims arrived. So beginning their story with Thanksgiving, and most times, kind of ending it there as well, it's very minimizing. It really limits our understanding of the richness and the beauty of their culture. And I would ask you to consider, again, taking the traditional first Thanksgiving story off of the table for that reason. And then to consider how, when looking at your curriculum that you have to teach for the full school year, how can you incorporate stories of indigenous people, their culture, and not just historically, but present, to really give your students a better understanding of this group of people and how important they've been to the founding of the country and continuing on into today. The third thing I would love for you to consider is this: instead of using the traditional first Thanksgiving story, incorporating the stories of the students in your classroom. At this point, we've been celebrating Thanksgiving for hundreds of years in the United States. And so we all have a personal connection with this holiday and how we celebrate it with our families or with friends, the ways in which maybe we dress up or we don't dress up, the things that we eat. And it's so interesting and eye-opening for students to be able to see how their classmates celebrate Thanksgiving, but in a different way than them. You can also bring in stories from the library about ways in which people celebrate Thanksgiving across the country. So then you are bringing in geographic diversity, but then also stories that feature racial diversity and ethnic diversity. And even if some of these stories don't necessarily focus on the holiday of Thanksgiving and that one day, how do people incorporate thankfulness and being grateful into their everyday lives? So there are many, many ways to really expand upon your students' understanding of this concept of being thankful and grateful that makes it more than just about the holiday, just about this one particular season. Again, please consider these three things as you are preparing your lesson. 1, removing the telling of the traditional story. 2, how can you incorporate the history and also the present culture and traditions of Native American people and understanding those stories into your classroom? And then 3, incorporating the stories of your own students and their peers and bringing in voices that are not represented in your classroom to really replace that traditional story, but still keep the essence, the spirit, the warmth, the love of the holiday of Thanksgiving alive and well.